Okay, we're gonna get started here, and tonight we're gonna start in Joshua. I have some material, and I'll explain to you guys how to get a digital copy, and then Brad and I might have Janae go make some copies for people who want a physical one. But let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this night that we're able to gather, to read your word, to hear the lessons and the urging that you have of faithfulness and to trust you and to follow your ways. Help us to learn the lessons from those who have gone before. Those who have been faithful and those who have fallen. Help us learn the lessons of both, that we might continue to please you with our life. And help us, Father, to understand your word, to give us wisdom, not only in understanding, but also in an application for us. And so we thank you for this evening, and we thank you for all the blessings we have because of your Son. In his name we pray. Amen. Okay, so Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, the last time I had done it, I pared it down and made it a very quick overview into, one quarter. And so rather than kind of just expand all the worksheets and different things for it, I decided that I would leave it and the worksheets I have that go one quarter, but I'm actually going to just do 2 weeks with like a single worksheet. And that way, if things come up in it that we want to talk about more the next time, we can. But it'll just give us a lot more time with it. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention as we go through it, I am going to give you a lot of maps here. This is kind of the area, what it looks like Canaan before they come in, the kingdom of Moab and the kingdom of Sihon, kingdom of Ammon. You can barely see kingdom of Edom there, and then there's the different Philistines are down here and things, and then the 7 tribes basically that the God wanted them to destroy within the land. And so I will kind of go through a lot of the maps as we go through it as well. Going to talk a little bit about the difference between the law and then once we start with Joshua, what really changes because for a lot of us, for Christians, I don't think we differentiate. I mean, we kind of have categories. You get the law and the prophets, and you have the wisdom literature. But we think of those as just categories of the Old Testament. But for the Jewish mindset, Joshua to Malachi is really different than the law. The law is what rules them. It's all of the laws of their land, of their nation. The prophets are more instructional about historical things, kind of telling them their history, as we looked at, in the back. The prophets mostly arise after the nation splits and when God is foretelling the destruction of the nations. And that's when the prophets come up the most. And so, for the Jewish person, they don't kind of read the scriptures the same. We might read through Joshua and kind of take these things the same way as others. And you can actually see this it's sometimes talked about when you study the New Testament, how the different groups of Jews treated the Old Testament even in Jesus' time. So there was a big disagreement between, especially the Sadducees and the Pharisees, over the resurrection of the dead. Well, the Sadducees didn't really honor most of the Old Testament. They really just honored the law. The rest of it was just like, somebody's opinion about something. And they just didn't treat it with a lot of authority. The Pharisees, on the other hand, treated it with great authority. And so, the Jews themselves couldn't really agree on the importance of all of those. And when we think about actually prophecy about Jesus, we don't get a lot of the prophecies we know about are really in the prophets, aren't they? It's not that there aren't there are many in the law. Moses talked about the prophet who would come that they would have to listen to. There's kind of hints of Jesus all the way back to Adam and Eve. There are, as we looked at a little bit, in the law itself, there's a lot of foreshadowing about Jesus being the Passover lamb and things. But here, when we come to Joshua and then Judges and Ruth, we're really looking at a kind of historical account, essentially of post-Moses all the way to the kings. That's really what we have, is this little historical narrative books. And Joshua is probably a little bit different than a lot of the rest, because even Judges comes much later. Because it's generally, I think the Jews think that Samuel wrote the Judges. And in Judges it talks about in that day when there was no king, implying that a lot of it was compiled and written down when there was a king. And so it's very much looking back at history, where Joshua is told to write these things down, and Joshua has about a 15-year span after they enter into the land. He's not alive for a lot of decades. So it takes place in a really short window. And it also takes place right after Moses. So the book of Joshua really accompanies the law really well, in the sense that it also shows the fulfillment of God's promises all through the law, and the calling of Abraham, calling of Israel out of Egypt and things. So, who wants a physical copy of this study guide? So it's a whole 6-month little packet. Who wants a physical copy? So 1, 2, 3. Now, who can actually print their own? Okay, so some might want a digital copy. These are all PDFs on the website. Right now, when you go to study material, it is the top one. It says 2022 study guide for Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. So for those who can print their own, download their own, look at it that way in your phone, your tablet, or whatever, I'll let you do that. Those who need them printed here, let me know how many that is, and we'll get I'm going to have her start getting those printed. So one printed, one, you want them? So probably 3. You don't need one printed? Okay. Okay, Janae, would you go ahead and go do that? Yeah, okay. So just print 3 of them for right now. And so if you want to read along in some of the intro that I'm going to do, you can go to our website and download that. You don't even need to be logged in as a member or anything for that. It's right there available. I don't think anything else I wanted to do as far as prior to getting into this. What was the other one? So this is essentially before Joshua. These are the conquerings that had happened of these nations: Moab, Sihon, the Ammonites. They are all conquered by Moses leading them in battle. And this is actually kind of where they go, and they end up having these battles, and they conquer, Moabites, then they conquer, the other ones and the Ammonites, Sihon and the Ammonites. So they conquer all of those before Joshua. So that, when we start Joshua, this is kind of where we're at. Moses has helped them conquer this whole side. Moses has gone up into the mountains, over here somewhere, where nobody could find him, and God has him die out there. And so there's no. You ever wonder why there's no burial for Moses? There's no place. There's no place you can go visit Moses' burial site or anything. Well, yeah, I think, it wouldn't be surprising if they did something like that. And, we know they turned that big bronze snake into a worship thing that, Moses had made in the wilderness to save the people from all the poisonous snakes that were attacking them. But they turned a lot of stuff into, shrines, altars, things to worship. And so I could certainly see them doing that. You ever think it might be a foreshadowing that there's no burial site for Jesus? Because we actually know where almost all the famous people of Israel are buried, right? Abraham is his wives. We know. We go to David, and we know where most of these people were buried, or they did. I don't know. They knew where they were all buried. And Jesus talks about it. Or I should say, Peter talks about it, Acts 2. He's like, we have David in the tomb. He saw corruption. So that passage about not seeing corruption is not about David. So about Jesus. So. I don't know. It is interesting. I thought the same thing, that, why God simply took him away from them. He simply just kind of disappeared. Part of me just thinks that it's almost a little bit of a foreshadowing of Jesus simply going away and going to heaven. And there's no big funeral thing. Not that they don't grieve, but there's no big funeral. There's no burial site. There's none of that. And there's nobody in the Old Testament who's more revered, right, than Moses. So, okay. So essentially what we're looking at is, in the book of Joshua, is a fairly quick recount of a whole series of events and then battles that lead to them coming in. And now this is all the same. This is kind of the same thing as this one, where this one is north-south. This one, north-south, runs this way. I don't know why the map set I have does that. Kind of drives me crazy a little bit. You got to kind of orient yourself what's north-south all the time. But it just kind of shows the process of how and this is where they came back to Shittim. And this is where they returned to this spot for the nation to enter and take Jericho to start, and then on in going into the land. Did you give people that wanted them their copies? Okay. You can kind of see roads and things here, and so you can see that there is a road that goes right into Jericho. So that's how one of the reasons Jericho is right first one on the way in. So, let's see. I meant a little bit about time frame. You guys, you know the kind of do you know the two time frames that are used in biblical writings about this? And the reason there are two is that the Jews have a different one than most Christians do. But the Jews tend to place it in the 1200s. Okay? And that the judges period is actually a fairly short one before the kings come along. The problem with that is then it makes some of the scriptures of the New Testament inaccurate, because Stephen talks about 400 years and things of the judges, and you get these references. I think Paul mentions it as well. And so you have this dichotomy, this problem. So essentially there are two dates used in biblical writings. Most people who will date these books, both the law and Joshua here, will kind of mention both of them. It's like the guy I use for some of this background stuff. He puts it in 14. So this is going to be roughly 1405, where this conquest is beginning. But it could be as 1250, 1200 if the Jews is more accurate. I don't think so, but so I think of it as roughly 1400. They're going to come in to the land. So is there anything else I really kind of before reading? Anything else I want to cover? Is there any questions you have about the book of Joshua before we get into it? We're gonna read through a lot of it. Okay. I think the early chapters of Joshua are the most engaging, and then the conquests goes pretty quick. The dividing up the lands goes pretty fast, and then becomes engaging again right at the end again when we have Joshua's last address. So when people are quoting Joshua or preaching from it, usually they're preaching from like the first chapter and the last couple chapters. So anyway, I do have, so the worksheet for this particular this week and next is Joshua chapters 1 through 3, okay? And so I have this particular one broken down into some explore it questions, get it questions, apply it questions. The explore it is the answers are just in the text, and I even give you the verses that have the answers. The get it is trying to understand it a little bit more. And the application is, pretty self-explanatory. How do we apply some of these principles in a way that we should as Christians? So, I think I want to. So we're gonna, and for those who've been around a while, I don't love worksheets personally. I like to read the passages and talk about things, what they mean, but I do provide them often for people. Because sometimes it's a device for people to, if you go answer a lot of this stuff, you'll have a lot of background to be able to talk about it. So it's there for you. I may ask these questions. I might not. So that's kind of where it goes, right?
Something like that. You may not even touch the whole worksheet.
I might not, yeah, that's possible. It depends. So I want to read the first 9 verses because I think this is really pretty critical to the whole conquest, and essentially what the nation was like, and after they have to replace Moses. And the thing is, there's really not somebody to replace Joshua. Joshua is essentially a helper for Moses, but we don't see Joshua having a helper that takes over for him. And so you have Joshua kind of stepping into Moses' shoes to lead them, but then there won't be one after him that's like Moses or like Joshua. The nation, and this is one of the reasons why it really devolves into a period of the judges, where there's no leadership. Now, there should be, but there isn't. So we're going to read the first 9 verses to start here. So it says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, to the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. A couple of things just to notice. First off, he kind of tells him to be strong and courageous twice. I don't know if I talked about it much earlier in Genesis and things when like Abraham got multiple visions. Joseph got multiple visions. They saw those, getting 2 or 3 visions as God confirming the message. Right? So it's that much more set in stone. And it's the idea of by 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay, and so you have that same thing here. He is emphasizing you are going to need to be strong and you're going to need to be courageous. And you are going to have to stop yourself from being frightened. This is not just a generic line, right? They're about to go to war. They all know that. He knows that. And so being told, don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Meaning you're going to look on stuff that goes, okay, that looks too big and strong for us. That looks like something we can't do anything with. And so he's telling him beforehand, you're going to need to be courageous. You're going to need to stop your fear. You're going to need to not become overwhelmed by that looks too big and too scary and too imposing for us. Right? I mean, that's what stopped them from going in the first time, right? When Joshua was one of the spies to spy out the land. 10 of them were going, no, these people they're giants. We can't do anything. And so we only have Caleb and Joshua who are going, oh, we can go take them. So Joshua is in that boat now, and he's leading them, and he's told you're going to have to be courageous. The other thing that's abundantly clear at this point is that the law has been written, hasn't it? So, a lot of scriptures we kind of try to guess their dating or when was this one before that one, but it's really clear. Joshua has the book of the law. He's got Genesis to Deuteronomy, and he's telling him, you have to do what I said to do. Because in there's a bunch of commands that they have to do when they get in even. So God had given them commands when they were in the wilderness. When you get in, you have to do this. When you get in, you've got to do this. We'll see that pointed out, a number of them in Joshua. And so he's got a whole bunch of stuff to do when he goes in. And so he's being reminded of that. Now, the description of the place where every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you. So it's already been given to them. And he says, they just have to go take it. And now the description of how far and wide it is pretty large. It's bigger than we think of. Okay, we think of Israel as kind of, let me go back. We think of Israel as kind of essentially being this. And then, they added this because they took this, and, 2.5 tribes decided they wanted to live over here. And so you have this land. But he says all the way over to the river Euphrates. I mean, that's like way over there. Except from here to there, what's all there? The desert of the Arabian desert. So yeah, most of it that's all been given to them is, it's impassable. And you can't do anything. Now, it also goes all the way down, to basically the edge of Egypt. And again, they don't occupy this southern very much in great numbers, but it is theirs. And then it goes up, basically, Mount Hermon is kind of up in the mountains of Lebanon, and he basically had told them it goes up into this area of Lebanon. It's kind of the cutoff. So, any thoughts or questions on this opening kind of commission of God and telling Joshua these things? Yeah.
I think we're seeing that the people are about to go through some big changes. I mean, they've been under the protection of the Lord for so long in the desert.
Yeah.
They've been nomadic. They have no place that they really could call home.
Mm-hmm.
So now, as they're going in to fulfill this promise of God, things are going to change. It's a big change for all of them.
Yep. It is, and when we think about the people going in too, they're nomads now. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's probably a fairly high percentage of the people who have never lived in a country, and a civilized country. Because only the people who are going in, other than Joshua and Caleb, they were 19 or younger when they came out of Egypt. And so they, by the way, 19 was considered a child who did not know right from wrong. Now, I don't know how many 19-year-olds agree with that statement, but God gave them a pass because they didn't know good from evil, as he says. And so, a big bulk of this people, they've grown up out in the wilderness, in tents. And they've been used to that for 40 years. And so even those who were young, who were either teenagers or children, they probably got used to being, desert dwellers. And now they're going to come in to a land where they're going to become farmers. All right, shepherds and things like that, yeah.
But in the interim, they're supposed to be soldiers.
Yeah,
None of them.
right, exactly. And yeah, I mean, there's none of them have fought. Well, they've had a little bit of a skirmish. They got a little taste, but it's going to be scary. They need God. They would lose these battles without God. Now, there is something that we're going to see as we go into the book. One of the great advantages of them being down there for 40 years, down here, is these nations are terrified of those people that are sitting down there off their southern borders, growing, and they're going, this doesn't look good for us. And so we see that even in Jericho. When we come right into the very first town, they're going to be like, hey, they're terrified of you. There's a lot of terror in the places. Because at this point, by the time they come in, they've been down here for decades. But then they began to march. The whole nation. And it's not just the army. The entire nation is marching up here. Okay, now, only the army will go in and cross the Jordan initially, but they all come and they all end up basically dwelling in this plain of Moab until the battles are finished. They go pretty quick, by the way. They destroy, and sometimes we may not realize this. They actually, the way the campaigns unfold, they actually destroy the armies of these nations very, very quickly. What they never really do is actually take the land very well. They have trouble with that part. But any other thoughts? And so yeah, this is a big change. This is going to be a scary time. It's going to be a difficult time. And a lot of people, a lot of us like the status quo, right? But God has promised them, God has promised them a land flowing with milk and honey, a beautiful land. But how many people would rather, God just deliver your food to your door every day?
They complained about that when he did.
They did, because it wasn't, it's like, it just tastes like sweet bread. I don't like sweet bread. And so, yeah, they're going to complain about whatever. They're as a nation, they're naturally complainers. But it's really easy to kind of get stuck in just where we're at is good enough, right? And trusting that what God is telling them, this is the place that will really be a blessing for you. It's better than me taking care of you here in the wilderness. And I think of that very much like what he's telling us in terms of, yeah, I can take care of you here on this earth. I can bless you and watch out for you and I can do all these things for you. But this isn't where you're going to be really blessed. Where you're really going to be blessed is in the place I have built for you. I have made for you. And so I want you to be in that city that I have made for you. I have prepared that city for you. So, okay. So there's a lot of trust that needs to be had by the people. And by the way, we're going to see essentially a single generation that is probably as good as the nation of Israel ever was. This is about as good as they're going to be. Okay. Any other thoughts or, yeah?
Just one other thing is that up until this point, Moses was the only ruler these people knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking 40 years that they were under Moses' rule.
Mm-hmm.
And now Joshua is stepping into that role.
Right.
And he too is going to be told to not be afraid.
Right. Yeah, and it's a good time maybe to also highlight who else is here besides Joshua, because Moses actually started out with just Moses, but by the end it's not just Moses, if we remember. Now it's primarily Moses, right? He's at the top. But we have what?
Moses and Aaron.
We have Aaron as the priest, but I was thinking about he creates the elders. He creates what ends up kind of being the Sanhedrin in the New Testament. He creates that the elders of all the tribes. Okay, it becomes a group of elders. And so Joshua is going to have Joshua and the elders. And that's really, because we're going to see by the end of the book that they are faithful for Joshua's life and the elders, that generation. So it's probably a little longer than Joshua's life because it appears only about 15 years from the time he's entering that he's going to be alive. But they probably are pretty good for maybe 30 or 40. But and so you're beginning to have this kind of group of elders, and we're going to see it all through the Old Testament. We see the judges, and there's always this group of elders, okay, that's kind of there. Okay, so let's read this next section, the rest of chapter 1. It says, Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people. Prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. And so when they had conquered this area, so the Reubenites and the Gadites had said, we would just like to have, this is our land. And then also it says, the way it says the half-tribe of Manasseh, I remember when I was a pretty new Christian, I thought Manasseh was a half-tribe. I don't know why. I don't know if I'd heard that somebody said that or I just thought it, but it's half of the tribe of Manasseh that wanted land over here, and half of it ends up over on the other side. Okay, I think because we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, and yet there really are 13, aren't there? Because Joseph's becomes 2. Becomes Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, it's still considered the 12 tribes of Israel. Why? Because the Levites get removed. And God says, I'm going to take them for myself, and they don't get an inheritance among you. But Levi is still considered a tribe, though. So, but anyway, so he's telling them, he's just warning them, listen, you have to keep fighting until this is all done. Even though we conquered your land already, you have to keep fighting. And so they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him, shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Okay. Any thoughts about, just this warning to these 2.5 tribes? Yeah.
I flinched when they said they were as obedient as they were.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like, wow, it'd be nice if you're a little more obedient. But I think the spirit of it is we're going to try to be obedient. Yes.
It's nice how they encourage Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that he encouraged them.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's something I haven't noticed before.
Yeah. Yeah. They're, hey, we're with you. We'll do whatever you say. Anybody doesn't obey you, we'll put to death. Which, and especially in a warfare, a battle of armies, soldiers are put to death when they don't obey. You don't get long trials. In warfare, you have to do what you're commanded, or you're executed pretty quickly. Especially in the ancient world, they just not going to have people who don't do it. Not going to have soldiers that don't do what they say they're going to do. And they're going to execute you right away. And they're committing to that. Any other things you notice here? Good or bad? I think one of the things that points to their understanding of God is only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. It's not may the Lord our God, may the Lord your God. I don't know if they're intending it that way, but it sure kind of, I do think a lot of times Israel felt like God was pretty distant from them. In part because they have the priests. They always have somebody to go to God for them. They don't get to approach God directly. They always, it was either Moses was going to God for them, or Aaron, or the priests, or the Levi, the priests. They always had to kind of entreat God for them, or even sometimes they would, even the kings they would ask, is there a prophet around? So God was always in their minds. I think when we read through the Old Testament, I think we need to help try to give them some benefit of the doubt from the standpoint of, I think a lot of us would have felt the same way if we were always told, you can't go, you can't do, that's for them. You have these intermediaries between you, and there's always somebody else telling you. They don't have their own Bibles, they don't have their own scriptures. It's all being told to them by somebody else. And so they kind of have God as being a little bit distant. And I think it comes out a lot in their language. They talk to even the prophets sometimes. They don't like what the prophets say. And they, Jeremiah, is like, well, you're God, and they just they don't have kind of like it's our God. They don't have that sense very well as a nation. That's something that they struggle with most of the time throughout their history. So, okay. Any other thoughts? So, one of the things he told Joshua, and this is kind of an application I think that we could talk about a little bit, and that is, he told them to, talking about the law, do not turn from it to the right hand or the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, and be careful to do what is written. And so there's two things he's been told here. You have to actually speak it. As a leader, as a ruler, there's a lot of laws there for the ruler to be careful of, isn't there? A lot of commandments that he has to know. This is what we should be doing. And this is what he has to enforce. But in order to do that, he's got to think about it. He doesn't just have to read it, he has to meditate on it every day. Is Joshua going to be a busy guy? And yet, he's told to meditate every day, morning and night. And so you think about, how do we meditate on the Word of God? They'll give a minute or so to come out.
The biggest part is, I think, our prayer and studying His Word, so that we know it's very much what we should be doing too.
Well, reading. It's one of the reasons why we create reading programs. Now, some people create their own reading programs through the Bible every year, but we started a few years ago. It's like, well, we're at least we do a little section of the Bible. It won't be a lot of time. Won't be real time consuming. But one of the reasons we put that out is to try and get us thinking about the Bible every day. And meditating on it is not just reading it. It's not studying it. It's thinking about it. So what we talk about in here should be something that hopefully you can take away to think about. How do I do that? Do I do that? Do I do that regularly? Because meditating, by the way, is something that all of us are commanded to do pretty regularly. So we'll leave it there for tonight. Appreciate all your thoughts. Let's go ahead. Come on in. Who's got stuff going on tonight? You have invitation? Okay. You know who? Dave's singing and closing prayer? Mike? Okay. I've got Rich for you, me, and Dave.